If you could please just, first of all, welcome to everyone. We're here for up to an hour to talk about the finance report. It's good to have Mike with us to answer any questions, and David too. Actually, it could be quite a short session because we have just 2 questions that have been forwarded to us for this morning, but we'll come to those in a minute. If you could just note what Leo has put up on the chat bar, and that is, first of all, please note this meeting is being recorded so that those who are not able to participate this morning and want to can listen to this meeting afterwards. If you want to speak at any point, please will you raise your hand either like this or with the little reaction hand that's available to you. When you speak, please say who you are and where you're from, and it would be good if you would mute your microphone when you're not speaking. We have had a bit of background noise, which has been unhelpful in previous meetings of this kind that we've had. So that's that. We'll begin with prayer. So let us pray. Gracious God, as we come to consider matters to do with the finances of your church, may we hold in mind your promise to equip us with the gifts and resources that we need to serve you well. May we have confidence in your promise, and may we use your gifts wisely and helpfully. As we recognise again that you call us to be part of the leadership of your church, help us to discern under the leading of your Spirit the best ways in which to organise our affairs in order that we can be effective as missional disciples in the communities and world in which we live. And as we meet together, give us your grace, we pray, that in our thinking and our listening and our speaking, we may be gracious and open to you speaking to us through others. Bind us together and bless us, and help us to have concern for those whose needs are greatest in the church, in our communities and in our world. As once again we offer ourselves and the lives of your churches in sacrificial service, following the example of Jesus, in whose name we pray. Amen. One or two extra folk have joined us along the way. You're very welcome. We have 2 questions that have been submitted to us, or 2 or 3. I think one of them's got a couple of questions within it. The first comes from Will Lindsay, who is from our St George's Church in Carlisle. And Will says, there didn't seem to be any management accounts, say for 6 months to the 30th of June 2020, included in the papers. Given the significant challenges to Synod, local churches and members are facing, it would be good to see how we are travelling financially. And then he goes on to say, I appreciate that significant changes have been made during the last 2 to 3 years in terms of centralising costs, expenses and asset and liabilities. And the last 2 years' income expenditure results may well have been negatively impacted as a result. If we follow current trends for a few more years, this will result in further significant erosion of capital and our ability to support all the initiatives in play to support our communities. I would like to see the development of our long-term plan, including financial implications, completed as a matter of urgency and within a much shorter timescale than 12 months. This was an action to be completed this year, and of course understand the challenges with coronavirus. Is this possible? So those questions from Will Lindsay from St George's Carlisle, and Mike, over to you.
I'll deal with it in two parts, Brian. In terms of the first part of that question, there's an apology and there's an explanation. As you will realise, we for this year changed the format in which we presented information about financial performance to make it more useful to understand in terms of what Synod is doing, how it supported churches, how it reflected priorities of the Synod. Unfortunately, the technology in our financial system hasn't quite kept pace with that, and the lockdown and the closure of the office hasn't helped. So there is a work in progress, but we expect that before the end of the Synod meeting, we will have a set of management accounts for the period up to the 30th of September available in the same format as the budget, etc., etc. So that's in progress. It's been a bit of a technical challenge to get the information into the right format. In terms of the second part of the question and looking ahead, I think there are two or three things I would want to say. Firstly, it's worth reflecting that for all the challenges and all the changes that we've made, actually the reserves position, as shown in the accounts at the end of last year, is not, looking at the unrestricted reserves, is not materially different to what it was two, 3 years ago. We really haven't drawn on capital at all in that period. And I recognise what Will is saying in terms of capital to support future work. But I think there is an important balance that we're trying to draw as Synod and the Trust. And I think local churches will be finding the same balance, which is about, at the end of the day, reserves are there for rainy days and difficult circumstances. And there is a balance that needs to be drawn between spending some of those monies now to make sure that the challenges and the issues at the moment are addressed, so that there is a long-term future. You know, the last thing I think any of us wants to end up with a situation is where the Synod has lots of cash reserves, but actually it's been at the expense of the support and the development of local churches and their missions. And that's the balance we're trying to draw to bring down some of that money for local churches, so that we can address the challenges, and we can help you address the challenges that the last 12 months has brought. In terms of the long-term plan, absolutely, the Synod Executive and the Trust Management Committee are clear that needs to be completed. There is a balance between just getting through some of the current challenges so that we have a bit more of a firmer footprint in terms of where we're starting from, as the impact of coronavirus continues to develop and be better understood. And moving forward, I think the 12 months is very much of an end date, in that I think having something finalised for a March Synod would be optimistic. So therefore, the 12 months, as much as anything, reflects the 6-month periods of Synod meetings, and certainly well before the October Synod, we'd expect to have that work done and complete.
Thank you, Mike. As it happens, Lindsay isn't with us this morning. It may well be that he's going to come to the second of these finance report meetings, so I can't ask him if he's got any response to what Mike has said, but I'll ask if anybody else wishes to. I can see John Piper's waving his hand. John.
Thank you, Brian. John Piper, member at Hurstnook URC and Deputy Treasurer of the URC. And I guess it's in that latter role I was going to just say a word of support for Mike. As well as all the other challenges caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, it's fair to say that all of us with financial responsibility in the church are coping with an unbelievable level of uncertainty about current and future income, and in reality I don't think that's going to settle down until probably 2023 in terms of really understanding what the new financial situation is. And so, as Mike says, for those of us who do have reserves, albeit limited, this is a time when I think we need to get through as best we can. And I'll take the opportunity to thank Mike alongside the other Synod treasurers for the support they've been providing to local churches and to the central church in terms of ministry and mission fund. But, you know, we are in extraordinary times, and one of the elements of the extraordinariness is that it's very, very hard to make accurate forecasts at this point.
Thank you, John. Anybody else wish to come in at this point? No? Okay. We'll move on then to Mike. I take it you've said all you wish to regarding Will's questions. Yeah. We've got a straightforward question from Jackie Embry. Would it be possible for future budgets to include comparative figures, please? It would have been very helpful for 2021 to have seen 2019 actual and 2020 projected figures alongside the budget figures. Mike.
If I was being a politician, just refer to my previous answer. But yeah, yes, that's always our plan. But we have a situation where our budget spreadsheet produces information in one form, our budget monitoring produces information in another form, and the future projections in a third form. So we just try to marry the three together at the moment.
Thank you. Jackie, any?
I would find it incredibly difficult to manage the finances if I had these things in different formats, Mike. Is there a plan to sort of reconcile them in some way?
Yes, yeah, we expect for next year we'll have everything coming out in the same same format.
Fair enough.
With my predecessor in the room, I'm of course being polite and diplomatic about how we've got to this point.
I don't want to knock anybody. I just found it incredibly difficult looking at the budget because there was nothing to sort of compare with or anything like that.
Yeah. It's a technical thing we're working on, and we'll have something in the next few weeks to share with people.
Great, and thank you for the support that you're offering churches. I think that's really important.
It's good that that we've got David Wyke here with us, and it's an opportunity to say thank you to David for the important and very helpful work that he's putting in communicating with churches that have got questions and concerns over finances. David Beaver's away in the Synod office and talks to a number of folk on the phone all over the Synod, but I think rarely do folk come face to face with him. So David, thanks for being here, and thanks for the work that you're doing for us.
Brian, if I can add to that, and in support of Mike and David, I think, I mean, obviously I have to take full responsibility for my time as treasurer, but actually David's predecessor operated the accounts of the Synod using Excel spreadsheets, which Microsoft didn't understand. So I didn't really stand any chance at all. Which is to say nothing about the credibility of them, but it does mean that changing them to a new system is quite a challenge. And I'm grateful to Mike and David for their efforts.
I think the other thing I would say, John, is that with the fact that in the last 2 years we've implemented the Synod Manse scheme and we've implemented the central payment of ministers' expenses, actually the complexity that the systems have to manage has also increased significantly in that period, and it's just needs a bit of a step back and work through, but we're working on that. Brian, I'm conscious we haven't got any more questions. I wonder if I could just say a little bit about the financial support for local churches that is part of the finance paper, and in a sense I know is what a number of churches are hoping that Synod will make a decision about in a couple of weeks' time. What we're trying to do in this is to focus resources on churches who have the greatest need, whilst enabling through the use of around Manse grants, other churches to also respond to the challenges that they face. It's being done in the spirit that if we can help a particular local church, we will do our best to help. We've created a set of rules in inverted commas about entitlement. But I want to be clear with people that if there are churches whose circumstances don't quite fit the rules, that David and I are open for a conversation about what support might be needed and how that might be achieved. The rules are designed to set a framework that will, I think, work for the vast majority, 90 to 100 of our 120 churches. Some of the others have, I have to say, more than sufficient reserves to be able to manage the situation through the use of their own resources. But there may be one or two churches where these don't quite work, and we need a conversation, and we're open and willing to have that conversation. As John said, you know, we certainly don't know what the end game is going to be in terms of the impact of coronavirus, 2022 or 2023. These measures are designed to build a firm platform for churches to move forward by addressing the issues you've raised in terms of the impact in this year and some of your concerns about the M&M fund for next year, and to provide some stability to the system, to give local churches and the Synod time to work together in terms of the future. But at the end of the day, I'm about using reserves which we can only use once. So churches do need to start planning as part of that process about how they can go forward, you know, within the resources they have available. You know, it's a dialogue and a process we'll work with people on, but the measures and the finances we're putting in place at the moment are designed to get people through the next 12 to 18 months. And then we'll see what happens beyond that.
Thank you, Mike. Does anybody wish to respond to what Mike has just said to us? Oh, John Piper.
Thanks, Brian. Sorry, just a practical question, really. If a local church applies for help along the lines, well, sorry, if Synod approves what you've set out, and if a local church applies for help in 2021 in the way that you've indicated, and the help is offered, how is that going to work practically? Are you expecting the local church to pay their M&M assessment as set and that you'll reimburse them, or have you thought that, is that clear yet or not?
Right, let's deal with some of the practicalities. In terms of the M&M for next year, local churches' assessments will not change as part of that. But what we will do is, when we notify London of the schedule of payments that need to be made, we will make the deductions for the proportion that Synod will pay, and Synod will pay London direct. There's no point in us paying local churches money for them to pay London. We'll do it that way.
So we'll pay the 50% or the 25%.
We'll pay the 50% or the 25% direct. It doesn't seem to add anything to anyone's benefit to do it another way. In terms of the grants to meet losses, that will clearly be paid into local churches on receipt of the required information.
Yeah.
David.
Can I add something? This is unscripted, but there you go. I just wanted to say, some of the people on this call, I notice, are treasurers, and what I've seen from my ivory tower, so to speak, is a lot of the church treasurers and secretaries are under a lot of strain at this time. I have spoken to some of you about this, and I just think we need to appreciate that and thank the treasurers for all the efforts they're making. I am aware we at the Synod are trying to help. We are on the same side, as I keep saying. But this goes, you mentioned, John, about support. I mean, that could be the Synod Manse scheme, which we're making funds available for people for just to keep going. There's the grants possibly, or loans. But also, I do feel this is a time when churches need to look at the reserves, the savings and their investments. Sometimes they'll have to cash in the investments because this is a rainy day, as Mike says. But some churches have quite a bit of money, earning virtually no interest at all at the moment. Now, I don't know personally what the best way to do that is. And as a Synod, this is something me and Mike are looking at. But obviously the goalposts have changed this year. But I would ask the churches to look at that, and we can help them and put the right people in touch with them, because it's such an uncertain time, but they have to do the right thing with their reserves. Yes, Marilyn.
Marilyn.
Looking at the man's money coming back to us, David, reading through the reports, it seems that Synod is keeping some control over this money. Now, when we initially sold our manse a few years ago, we were told we would get a lump sum back, and our committee decided at that point what we would like to, as a one-off pot of money, how we would like to spend it. It now appears that we have to apply back to Synod for permission to spend it on the project that we had in line. Is that right?
I think that's a question rather more for Mike than it is for David.
Oh.
We're applying the resolutions that were agreed at the implementation of the Manse scheme, which is that the normal requirements for drawdown of money apply, which means it's not an application, but it is a sort of formal request that indicates what the money is going to be spent on. That's part of the normal controls we operate on any money that's held through Synod. It's not a long approval process or an application form. It's simply an appropriate request that indicates how much is required and for what purpose. Helps us understand what churches are doing. It discharges the custodian trustee responsibilities in a clear and responsible way. But it's entirely consistent with long-standing Synod policy and the resolutions that were agreed by the Synod meeting back in March 2018 around the Manse scheme implementation.
Thank you, Mike. That's helpful. Marilyn?
Just to put some meat on these bones, we were planning, our heating system was put in the 1940s. The pipes and the radiators that were put in 1940s, and they're still working, but not very efficiently. And we decided that if we were going to get a sum of money, we would like to use that money to make our heating more efficient. Is this likely that this would be approved? Because we're using money from the sale of our manse that was our money, and we're having to ask how we can spend it on a thing that we think is quite reasonable to improve the heating for mostly elderly people who are coming.
Absolutely, it's not an asking for approval. It's a requesting the drawdown with appropriate information. So that sort of we have approved. I mean, we've approved a wide range of requests already, including work related to making the buildings fit for purpose in terms of the church's mission going forward. We've approved requests to use the money to support community development workers and things like that. So you know, the sort of thing you're talking about, you know, is absolutely fine.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we're at a point where we can draw this to a close. We've answered the questions that were put in beforehand and given Mike and David an opportunity to prepare their responses to those. Mike's given us some additional helpful information, which he's just shared. So I think we're able to call it a day. There will, of course, be, this is the first of two gatherings to look at the finance report. So if you feel that you want more of this, then you can come back next time. This is the third of 6 question and answer sessions on the book of reports. We've had one on the Synod review, we've had this one on finance, and we've had another one on other reports that are contained in the book of reports. So we've had one of each, and there's a repeat exercise for each of those 3 sessions, the details of which are in the book of reports, which if you don't have a copy, you can find on the Synod website. So show up for more if you want to. If not, we look forward to seeing you on the 14th of November. That's a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock for the main part of our Synod meeting. So thanks everybody for showing up this morning.
May I just...
hang on a minute, Mike Walsh.
I just wanted to use this opportunity to say thank you to all the Synod officers and staff. You've been very generous saying thanks to everyone else this morning who's been struggling with stuff. Just, you know, you've had the same pressures in a different way going through this crisis, and not just that. I, for one, have very much appreciated the direction of travel over the last 2 years or so in improving services available to local churches and trying to take administrative burden off local churches as much as possible. And I can see that that's the direction you're still hoping to go, and that's really great. I see bits of that in the proposed new structures as well. I made my concerns about other parts of the structures known in a different meeting, but I just wanted to say I will always support stuff that's in this direction of taking burden off local churches. And thank you for all you've done on that in the last couple of years.
Thank you, Mike. Did I see one more hand? Bernie.
Yeah, hi. I wanted to just raise a little problem I'm having. I don't think it's at my end. I'm very adept on Zoom now. I've tried to get into 2 previous meetings and failed. I was on time, but one of them said they're keeping you in the waiting room. So I wanted to suggest that the waiting room is particularly monitored if you're going to use it. Or if it's a difficulty for whoever's taking the minutes or whatever, then assign a co-host to watch the waiting room. I'm trying to be constructive about this. Many thanks.
Thank you. I'll ask Leo's listening in, although we can't see him, and I'll ask him to comment on that in a moment. But just to say, Bernie, at the last meeting that we had, I couldn't get in through the waiting room for some reason, and I had to go in through my Zoom account. So there have been 1 or 2 difficulties about that, which I think are beyond our control. But in order to try and mitigate it, I think that that Leo has disabled the waiting room. Leo, is that right?
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. I became aware of the issue when Brian sent me a text saying, I'm in the waiting room, let me in. But the waiting room wasn't showing on my computer, or it was showing as empty. So for the last meeting, I disabled the waiting room. And for this meeting, I have disabled the waiting room and will do so for future meetings. So people should just come straight in. So hopefully, Bernie, that will resolve the issue for you.
Thank you very, very much. It was ever so frustrating to wait half an hour, you know. Many thanks.
Okay, good. Thank you, everyone, for this morning, and see you on another occasion. Okay, bye for now.
Bye. Bye.